Good day, everyone. I'm delighted to have this chance to speak with you today on such an important issue, not just for Israel, but as you've heard from the last speaker, the rest of the world. And let me focus my few minutes on the United States. The US obviously has a special place as the world's single largest economy, but also as the nation where a good deal of the trends can be witnessed in a very interesting way. Let me tell you that I had the honor of being selected by the White House to serve on a panel that is surveying the role of economic growth and economic competitiveness on the United States. We look at what's happening in our nation, we put it in a global context, and the bottom line is jobs and median income. That is, what does wealth creation look like in our nation, not measured in terms of stock market wealth, but in terms of the wealth and income of individual families. And during the process of our research on that important prospect, we discovered a number of things, and that is, regardless of nation, there are several ingredients that are critical for economic growth and economic prosperity. These include things that can be done at the individual level, but also things that will require appropriate public policy. Think about the significant investment that we make as a nation in education to make sure that everyone does have an opportunity. Think as well about the investment that we make in infrastructure. In the United States, one of the most important investments in infrastructure in the 19th century was our canal system that connected some of the coastal areas to the inland areas, followed by the railroad system in the mid-19th century. And we can think of any number of extraordinary infrastructure projects in the United States that facilitated economic growth. And the third piece of it is a commitment to research and to innovation, however you wish to define that. It means something today, and I think given all of the technology-related sessions here at this conference, you can think about that. But again, let's go back to the United States, 1865. It's the last year of our Civil War, not exactly a great period of prosperity for the US economy, a period of enormous distress politically. And what did our political leaders spend some of their time on? Two extraordinary investments in the future. One of those was the Transcontinental Railroad, which connected the Atlantic to the Pacific coast. And the other was something called the Morrill Land Grant Act of 1865. Professor Skidelsky, I hope that you have become increasingly familiar with this, because in 1865, Cornell University and many other of the wonderful public universities in the United States were funded. And the idea was that for the United States to go from what was then a relatively small emerging economy to something else, it needed to have trained scientists, trained engineers, and an educated populace. This was what they invested in 1865. So when we think about the excuses being used today about not making these investments in education and infrastructure and research to bring everyone along, it really becomes problematic. Now, we have limited time as part of this opening statement, and so I'm not going to talk about something that I would be happy to as part of the Q&A, and that is what is happening to median income in the United States and what is happening in terms of the gap in unemployment. In the United States, for example, at the worst part of the recession, the unemployment rate for those with a college degree was 4%. dramatically below the national unemployment rate. And for those people who had a high school degree or didn't finish high school, the unemployment rate was 18%. So we have this enormous divergence, which helps explain the divergence in income. But I want to use my remaining couple of minutes to talk instead about the sort of investments that could happen now, and I want to really focus in very narrowly. The United States is a very large economy. The reality is that we have many economies. We often now refer to them as metros or metropolitan areas, and Mayor Emanuel referred to this earlier. And what we see is that the most valuable ways to put forth economic policy for growth is through a metropolitan ecosystem. And I want to turn to New York City. 2002, Michael Bloomberg became the mayor of the city of New York, and he knows a little bit about financial services. And he said the city needs to diversify away into other industries. And a very thoughtful analysis was undertaken in terms what of the strengths of the city, population, what do they know, who are they, where do they come from, what are their skills, what are the natural resources, what are the constraints of the metro area, and how do we improve our economy, not to get through the current crisis, but to grow for the next decade or two or three. And there was a focus in on other industries, media, healthcare, IT. And it may surprise you to know that even though the rest of the United States still has a jobs deficit, that is, the overall country is still short 2% of the jobs that we had before the financial crisis, New York City has more jobs. Because the focus was on who is here and what can they do. Jobs were created for people who had trouble because they did not have the skills. The focus on our hospitality and tourism industry is phenomenal. A city of 8 million people has 50 million tourists every year. It creates jobs for everyone along the spectrum. And my final observation is this. Many of you here may have heard about the New York Initiative, which is referred to as the Cornell Technion campus. I know in Israel it's often referred to as Technion Cornell. I am a member of the board of Cornell University. It's Cornell Technion. And that is part of building the ecosystem that will create jobs. The city making a significant investment, providing the land, for example. Cornell University, which is now a public and private university, providing an enormous amount of funding, thus far making a pledge of up to $2 billion, and then significant pledges and money already on the table from corporations. And what are they doing? They're looking to train the next generation of scientists, the next generation of engineers, but it doesn't stop there. There is a commitment on the part of the graduate students and the faculty on this campus to go into the New York City public schools and teach kindergarten through high school. And one final piece of information. We have some very interesting data for the city of New York, but it applies throughout the country. If you have an industry, whatever it is, that is growing and growing well, it raises income for everyone, almost regardless of the skill set. And so we can show that in the technology industry in New York City, everyone gets paid more. This is an industry that is attracting capital. It's an industry that's attracting immigrants from around the world and immigrants from other parts of the United States. And it doesn't matter whether you are the chief financial officer or you are the custodian who cleans up the office at the end of the day, your income is rising because this is a growing industry. And as we think about the problems that we know that we are facing in New York, in the United States, in Israel, and elsewhere, let's keep in mind that one of the potential solutions is making sure that we are promoting industries that can create jobs and jobs not just for those who have the highest skills, but for everyone in the population.